From a courageous protest by an Iranian woman against the compulsory hijab in 1979 to Japan's intense anti-British propaganda campaign in 1941, here are 20 brutal photos you won't find in history books. Number 1. Women protesting. On March 8, 1979, women in Iran took a bold stand against the government's attempt to impose the hijab on all women. Just a month after the Iranian Revolution had overthrown the Shah's regime, the new government, under Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a mandate that all women must wear the headscarf in public. This was a drastic shift in policy, especially for those who had enjoyed the freedom to choose their clothing during the Shah's regime. The women who took to the streets that day were not just protesting a piece of fabric, but were also fighting for their rights and freedom. The protest on that March day was significant because it was the first large-scale demonstration by women in the newly formed Islamic Republic. Women from all walks of life, including students, professionals, and mothers, gathered in Tehran and other cities to voice their opposition. They carried banners and chanted slogans, demanding the right to choose whether or not to wear the hijab. The streets were filled with a sea of women who were determined to protect their freedom of choice. Number 2. Eugene Stepanovic Kopytev. In 1941, a photograph was taken of a young Soviet soldier named Eugene Stepanovic Kopytev on the day he left to join the war. He looked fresh-faced and full of hope. His eyes showed determination and a sense of duty to defend his country. The second photograph was taken in 1945, after the end of World War II, just 4 years later. The difference between the two images is striking. In the second photo, Eugene looks much older and wary. His face is marked by deep lines, and his eyes tell a story of pain and suffering. The war had taken a toll on him, and it was clear that he had seen and experienced things that had aged him far beyond his years. Number 3. The last words of a soldier. A Red Cross nurse sat beside a young soldier on a battlefield in 1917. The air was thick with smoke and the sounds of distant gunfire. The soldier lay on the ground, his uniform stained with blood. His breathing was shallow and his voice was weak. But he had something important to say. The nurse, calm and focused, took out a small notebook. The war that took place from 1914 to 1918 was known as World War I. It was one of the deadliest conflicts in history. Millions of soldiers and civilians lost their lives, and the world was forever changed by the horrors of war. The war started after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, which led to a chain of events that pulled many countries into the conflict. The fighting took place in trenches, with soldiers living in terrible conditions, facing cold, hunger, and constant danger. The war saw the introduction of new weapons like machine guns and poison gas, which made the battles even more deadly. Many soldiers, like the young man in this story, were injured or killed in these brutal conditions. Number 4. The Night Witches. In 1941, a group of fearless Russian women decided to fight the Nazis. These women became known as the Night Witches. They were part of the Soviet Air Force, and their mission was to bomb German targets by night. These pilots were part of the 588th Night Bomber regime. They flew planes that were slow and made of wood, which was an old design from the 1920s. The planes were small and had open cockpits, so the pilots could feel the cold wind and hear the engine roar as they flew through the night sky. The Night Witches had a special way of attacking. They flew in close to the ground to avoid detection and dropped their bombs on the Nazis when they were least expecting it. The sound of their planes coming was like a whisper in the night, which is how they got their nickname. The Germans were terrified of these women, and they couldn't believe that women could be such skilled and daring pilots. Each night, the night witches would take off for their dangerous missions. They didn't have radar, advanced guns, or protection like other pilots. They only had maps, compasses, and their courage. They would often fly in pairs, one plane drawing the attention of German searchlights and anti-aircraft fire, while the other plane went in for the attack. This tactic confused the enemy and made the night witches even more feared. The night witches became legends. They flew more than 30,000 missions during the war and dropped over 23,000 tons of bombs on Nazi targets. 30 of these brave women lost their lives in the line of duty and were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, which was the highest honor. Number 5. Kesha Thomas. In 1996, a young African-American woman named Kesha Thomas did something remarkable in Ann Arbor, Michigan. During a protest against the Ku Klux Klan, emotions ran high and anger filled the air. Many people had gathered to voice their opposition to the KKK, a group known for its racist and hateful beliefs. The protest was meant to be peaceful, but things quickly took a turn when an alleged KKK supporter appeared among the crowd. The atmosphere grew tense, and soon a mob began to form around this man. Kesha Thomas was just 18 years old when she witnessed the situation. As the crowd became more aggressive, people started to shout at the man. The mob's anger boiled over, and they began to physically attack him. They pushed him to the ground and kicked him. It looked like the violence would only get worse, but Kesha stepped forward and did something that no one would expect. She used her body to shield the man from the crowd, even though she knew he was part of a group that had caused harm to people like her. Her actions were driven by compassion and a belief that violence is never the answer. Kesha later explained that her decision to protect the man was based on her understanding that hurting someone else wouldn't make the situation better. She believed that kindness could break the cycle of hate. The image of her protecting the man became famous and showed the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Number 6. Annette Kellermans' bold stand. In 1907, a woman named Annette Kellerman took a bold step that challenged the norms of her time. Annette was a talented swimmer and actress from Australia who had a passion for swimming. But during this period, women were expected to wear heavy, uncomfortable bathing suits that covered their bodies from head to toe. These bathing suits made it difficult for women to swim freely. Annette believed that women should have the right to wear more practical swimwear that allowed them to move with ease in the water. To promote this idea, Annette designed and wore a fitted one-piece bathing suit. This was a revolutionary act because women were not allowed to wear such outfits at the beach. Her one-piece suit was tight-fitting and revealed more of her body than the traditional bathing suits of the time. Annette's choice of swimwear was not just about comfort, but also about making a statement for women's rights. She wanted to show that women should have the freedom to choose what they wear, especially when it came to activities like swimming. Annette's actions shocked many people and soon caught the attention of the authorities. In 1907, while she was at Revere Beach in Boston, she was arrested for indecency because of her bathing suit. This arrest drew public attention and sparked a debate about women's rights and the standards of decency. Some people supported Annette's stand, seeing it as a step toward greater freedom for women. Others believed that she had gone too far and that her actions were inappropriate. Number 7. Native American mother and child. In the 1900s, Native American families were tightly connected to their culture and traditions. A Native American mother played a key role in keeping these traditions alive. She was responsible for teaching her child the ways of their people, This included everything from storytelling to survival skills. The mother often had to do this while facing many challenges from the outside world. During this time, Native Americans were dealing with significant changes. Many were forced to live on reservations, and their traditional ways of life were being threatened. The government was trying to make Native Americans adopt a more European way of life. This made it difficult for mothers to pass on their culture. But despite these challenges, many Native American mothers were determined to keep their traditions alive. A Native American mother in the 1900s would likely wear clothing made from animal hides or cloth. She would have carefully decorated her clothes with beads and other materials. These decorations often had special meanings or were a way to express their identity. The mother would carry her child in a cradle board, which is a type of carrier that allowed her to keep her child close while she worked. The cradle board was not just practical, but also a way to keep the child safe and comfortable. A Crow mother in the 1900s would have been a key figure in her community. She would have passed on the traditions of the Crow people to her children. This included teaching them about the tribe's history, language, and customs. She would have taught her children how to live off the land, as the Crow had done for generations. Number 8. Undercover Officer's Mission. On July 1, 1969, in Brooklyn, New York, an undercover police officer was on a mission. He walked down busy streets, blending in with everyone around him. Brooklyn in 1969 was a place where crime was not uncommon. There were neighborhoods where people lived in fear because of the high rates of violence and theft. Gangs were active, and drug trade was becoming more widespread. On that day, the officer was particularly interested in a group that had been causing trouble in the area. They were known for their involvement in robberies and assaults, and it was his job to keep an eye on them. As the day progressed, the officer continued his surveillance, moving from one location to another. He noticed a few suspicious individuals who seemed to be up to no good. He followed them at a distance, making sure they didn't notice him. The streets of Brooklyn were filled with people, making it easy for him to blend in. Number 9. Boy's First TV Experience. In 1948, a young boy stood in front of a TV screen for the first time. He had never seen anything like it before. The screen glowed with black and white images that seemed to come to life right before his eyes. The boy was amazed as he watched people moving and talking inside the small box. Just a few years earlier, TV had been something people could only dream about. The history of televisions dates back to the 1920s, when inventors began working on moving pictures visible to an audience. In 1927, a team from Bell Telephone Laboratories transmitted the first long-distance TV images, which was a groundbreaking achievement. Over the next 2 decades, television technology improved, making it possible for people to watch shows and news broadcasts in their homes. By 1948, when the boy first saw television, the technology had advanced to the point where it was becoming a part of everyday life. Number 10. Sunlight blocked by a tall building. Grand Central Terminal in New York City is an iconic landmark known for its grand architecture and bustling activity. But back in 1929, there was something different about it. The sun used to shine through the windows, filling the terminal with natural light. But today, the surrounding tall buildings block the sunlight, casting shadows over the terminal. In the past, when the sun streamed in, it made the terminal a place full of warmth and energy. But now, with the towering buildings around it, the sunlight no longer reaches the same way. This change reminds us of how cities grow and change over time, sometimes altering even the simplest pleasures, like a ray of sunlight. Grand Central Terminal first opened in 1913, designed by the architectural firms Reed and Stem and Warren and Wetmore. Over the years, the skyline around Grand Central Terminal changed dramatically. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, then make sure to give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel for more such content in the future. Number 11. Arikara Warrior. In 1909, a famous photographer named Edward Curtis took a powerful photograph of an Arikara warrior named Bear's Belly in North Dakota. The photo shows the warrior standing tall and proud, dressed in traditional clothing. This captures the moment in time when the Arikara people faced many challenges as their traditional way of life was changing. The image of Bear's Belly is not just a photograph, but a window into the history and culture of the Arikara. Edward Curtis was known for his work documenting Native American tribes. He spent many years traveling across the United States to capture the lives of different tribes. His photographs are important because they preserve the history and culture of Native American people at a time when their way of life was under threat. Curtis believed that it was important to record these images so that future generations could understand and appreciate the rich cultures of the tribes. Bear's Belly was an Arikara warrior, and his photograph is one of many that Curtis took to document the lives of Native American warriors. The Arikara, like many other tribes, had a strong warrior tradition. Warriors were respected and held in high esteem within their communities. Number 12. Soldiers at Shornmead Fort. In 1940, British soldiers stationed at Shornmead Fort in England were preparing for a drag show when they were suddenly interrupted by a German air raid. The soldiers had to stop the rehearsals and quickly manned the BL 6-inch Mk7 naval gun to defend the fort. This moment captures the unusual mix of tension and normalcy that soldiers experienced during World War II. The BL 6-inch Mk7 naval gun was an important piece of artillery used by the British during the war. It was originally designed for naval use, but was later adapted for use on land. The gun could fire shells weighing over 100 pounds to a distance of more than 14,000 yards. This made it a powerful weapon for defending coastal areas like Shornmead Fort. The soldiers who manned these guns had to be well trained and ready to act quickly in the event of an attack. The German raid on Shornmead Fort was just one of many instances where the soldiers had to put their training into action. Shornmead Fort, located along the Thames River, was part of the defense system protecting London from enemy attacks. The fort was originally built in the 19th century, but was upgraded during World War II to strengthen its defenses. Number 13. Lockheed Martin's role in World War II. In 1944, Sally Wadsworth, an employee at Lockheed Martin, was working on the fuselage of a P38 Lightning in California. The P38 was a crucial aircraft during World War II, known for its distinctive twin-boom design. Sally's work was part of a larger effort by many Americans who contributed to the war by working in factories. These efforts were essential in ensuring that the military had the equipment it needed. The P-38 Lightning, which Sally helped build, played a vital role in the war. It was designed by Lockheed and made its first flight in 1939. The aircraft was fast and could fly long distances. This made it useful in many different types of missions, including bombing, reconnaissance, and even as a fighter. The P-38 had 2 engines, which was unusual for a fighter plane at that time. This design gave it more power and allowed it to carry more weapons. The P-38 was used in various theaters of World War II, including Europe and the Pacific. It was especially effective in the Pacific, where it was used to shoot down enemy planes and attack ground targets. The plane was involved in some of the most important battles of the war. One of the most famous missions involving the P-38 was the interception and shooting down of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. This mission, known as Operation Vengeance, took place in April 1943 and demonstrated the P-38's capabilities. Number 14. Belgian Coal Miners' Day. In the 1920s, coal miners in Belgium would emerge from the depths of the earth after a long day of hard work. These men, covered in coal dust and weary from their labor, would ride the coal mine elevator up to the surface. The work was dangerous, with risks of cave-ins, gas explosions, and lung diseases from inhaling coal dust. But this was the life of a coal miner in Belgium, and their work was vital for powering homes, factories, and railways. One of the well-known mines during that era was the Hassad de Charat coal mine. This mine was located in the town of Charat, which was part of the larger industrial heartland of Belgium. It began operations in the 1860s and quickly became one of the most significant coal mines in the region. The Hassad de Charat mine was known for its steep shafts, which required the miners to descend deep into the earth. The coal extracted from the Hassad de Charat mine was used for various purposes. It fueled the Industrial Revolution in Belgium, powering steam engines and providing heat for homes. The coal industry was the backbone of Belgium's economy during this time, employing thousands of workers. The town of Charat, like many other mining towns, was built around the coal industry. The lives of the miners and their families revolved around the mine. Working in the coal mine was grueling. Miners would spend long hours in the dark, cramped tunnels, using picks and shovels to extract the coal. The conditions were harsh, and accidents were common. Number 15. Visiting the quarantined. In 1905, a photograph taken by Anders Beer Wils captured a poignant moment at Olival Hospital in Oslo. The image shows people visiting their quarantined family and friends, a scene filled with both hope and worry. In those days, diseases like tuberculosis and smallpox were common, so quarantine was a necessary but difficult reality for many families. People would come to see their loved ones from a distance, often speaking through windows or from behind barriers. It was a way to stay connected even when separated by illness. Olival Hospital was one of the most important hospitals in Norway. It opened in 1887 and quickly became a central part of Oslo's healthcare system. The hospital was designed to handle a wide range of medical needs, including the treatment of contagious diseases. Over the years, it expanded and modernized, adding new buildings and departments to keep up with the growing population of the city. By 1950, Olival Hospital had become a major medical center in Norway. It was not only a place where people received treatment, but also where new medical techniques and practices were developed. The hospital played a crucial role in public health, especially during times when outbreaks of disease threatened the population. Doctors, nurses, and other medical staff at Olival worked tirelessly to care for patients, often in challenging conditions. Number 16. Cliff House. The Cliff House was a famous spot in San Francisco. Many people would go there to see the beautiful views of the ocean. The Cliff House had a special charm that attracted visitors from all over. But in 1907, a terrible fire destroyed it, and it was never the same again. This place was first built in 1863, but the fire of 1907 was not the first time it had been damaged. In 1894, the original building was badly damaged by fire, but it was rebuilt in 1896. The new version was a grander structure with several stories and elaborate designs, and it quickly became a symbol of San Francisco's charm. It was often visited by the city's elite and tourists alike. The fire of 1907, though, was particularly devastating. The fire was so strong that it reduced the iconic building to ashes. The only things left standing were the brick chimneys. People were heartbroken to see such a beloved landmark destroyed. In the years following the fire, the Cliff House was rebuilt again. This time, It was a more modern and less ornate structure built in 1909. It still attracted visitors, but many felt it lacked the grandeur of the previous versions. Over the years, the Cliff House went through several changes, but it remained a beloved part of San Francisco's history until it was closed in 2020. Number 17. Shepherds enjoy music. In 1939, in Azerbaijan, a group of shepherds sat down to listen to music records. This photo captured a simple and peaceful time in their lives. The shepherds, who spent most of their days tending to their flocks in vast open fields, found joy in the music. But 1939 was also a significant year for Azerbaijan, as the world was on the brink of World War II. Azerbaijan was part of the Soviet Union at the time, and the country played a crucial role in the war. Azerbaijan was known for its oil resources, which were vital to the Soviet war effort. The oil fields in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, were some of the most productive in the world. The oil produced here was used to fuel the Soviet military machines, making it a strategic target during the war. In 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Azerbaijan's oil became even more critical. The Soviet government worked hard to protect the oil fields from being captured by the Nazis. The people of Azerbaijan also played a vital role in the war effort. Thousands of Azerbaijanis joined the Soviet army to fight against the German forces. The country also provided food and supplies to support the troops. But the war brought many challenges to Azerbaijan. The constant threat of attacks on the oil fields meant that the people lived in a state of fear. Many families were separated as men went off to fight in the war. The economy was heavily focused on supporting the war effort, which meant other aspects of life, such as agriculture and education, were neglected. In 1950, Azerbaijan was still recovering from the effects of the war. The oil industry remained a key part of the economy, but the country was also trying to rebuild and improve other sectors. Education and healthcare were areas that needed attention, as the government worked to improve the quality of life for its people. Number 18. JFK and Bill Clinton meeting. In 1963, a young Bill Clinton stood in the White House, excited to meet President John F. Kennedy. The event was a Boys Nation trip, and Clinton, only 16 at the time, was among the group of young men selected to visit Washington, D.C. Bill Clinton's meeting with JFK was brief but meaningful. Clinton was part of the American Legion's Boys Nation program, which brought together young leaders from across the country. During this visit to the White House, the young men gathered for a photo opportunity with the president. As Clinton approached Kennedy for a handshake, the photographer captured the moment, which would later become an iconic image in American history. Clinton would later reflect on this meeting as a pivotal point in his life, fueling his desire to pursue a career in public service. Years later, in 1993, Clinton himself would enter the White House as the 42nd President of the United States. The handshake with JFK in 1963 served as a symbol of the torch being passed down from one generation to the next. Clinton's presidency was marked by significant achievements and challenges, including the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, and his efforts to balance the federal budget. His time in office also saw economic growth and a focus on welfare reform. Number 19. Auschwitz Liberation. On January 27, 1945, the Soviet Red Army discovered and liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp. Located in Poland, Auschwitz was the largest of the Nazi death camps, where over 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, were murdered. The liberation of Auschwitz revealed the horrifying extent of the Holocaust to the world. The soldiers who entered the camp found thousands of sick and starving prisoners who had survived the unimaginable cruelty. Auschwitz was established by Nazi Germany in 1940. It was originally intended to hold Polish political prisoners, but quickly expanded to become a major site of mass murder. The camp was divided into three main parts: Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II, Birkenau, and Auschwitz III, Monowitz. Auschwitz II Birkenau became the primary site for the extermination of Jews, with gas chambers and crematoria built to carry out the genocide efficiently. The camp also held many other victims, including Romani people, Soviet prisoners of war, and Polish prisoners. During the war, more than 1.3 million people were sent to Auschwitz, and only about 200,000 survived. The liberation of Auschwitz marked a significant turning point in the war and exposed the full horror of the Nazi regime. Number 20. Japanese anti-British propaganda. In 1941, Japan used anti-British propaganda to stir up public sentiment against the British Empire. This was part of Japan's larger effort to justify its military actions in Asia and the Pacific. The propaganda painted the British as oppressive colonizers, exploiting Asian nations for their own gain. Japan positioned itself as a liberator, claiming it would free Asia from Western domination. This message was spread throughout posters, radio broadcasts, and films, aiming to unite Asian countries under Japanese leadership. In December 1941, Japan launched its attack on British territories, including Hong Kong and Malaya, which marked the start of the Pacific War. But those photos are still nothing compared to these brutal history photos at your right-hand side.